I've been hearing quite a bit lately about the idea that the responsibility for an affair is shared jointly between both partners in the marriage. And sometimes people are hearing this from their friends and family. Sometimes they're hearing it from others that are in an affair support group. And sometimes they're even hearing it from their marriage therapist. And for those of us that have been betrayed, being told that we are jointly responsible for that betrayal is an additional trauma. And not only that, the claim is usually way off base because the people making it are making most, if not all, of these assumptions. The first assumption is that the betrayed is working with complete and accurate information. And I don't know about your particular circumstances, but I know when my husband was cheating on me, I knew none of what was going on. Not only was he not disclosing things, he was actively working to hide information from me. And that's usually the case. I want you to think about this scenario. Think about a patient and a doctor relationship. And think about this patient goes in and is actively lying to the doctor about their symptoms. And they're hiding things, they're not disclosing things. Maybe they're even, doing things like taking Tylenol to bring their fever down before they go see the doctor. And then we're going to blame the doctor for not accurately diagnosing them. Well, how could the doctor make an accurate diagnosis when they didn't have complete and accurate information? And in a marriage where there is infidelity occurring, it is much the same. We are like that doctor. And so we are making conclusions and responding based on the information that we have. But we can't respond to what we don't know. And it is not fair to hold us responsible for those things that are actively being kept from us. Assumption number 2 is that the affair was motivated by something missing from within the marriage. And this is something that the betrayed so often get the blame for. I know when my ex left me, people made all kinds of conclusions, false conclusions about what our marriage was like and what our intimacy was like and all of these things. And none of them were true. So I don't know exactly what his motivations were for seeking the affair, but I can tell you that those things weren't missing in our relationship. That intimacy was there, that connection was there, that attention was there. And this is so often the case. Many people that have affairs do so because they are not happy with themselves. They have some sort of an emptiness within them, and that void is something that they are trying to fill in any way that they can. It's much like an addict who is seeking substances. And when we blame the betrayed in these situations, we're looking the wrong direction. It's not that the marriage itself was missing something, it's that the cheater was missing something. Even if that something they were missing was simply some empathy and some common sense. Assumption number 3 is that equal energy is being put into the marriage by both partners. Now, I'm going to go back to that doctor-patient analogy for a minute. Think about this doctor has prescribed medication for the patient. And the patient says, hey, I'm taking my meds. I'm doing them all the time. But they're not. Instead, they're lying to the doctor. And the doctor is confused because every time they run tests, they're not seeing the change in numbers that they're expecting to see. And the doctor is assuming that the patient is doing what they're saying, but the patient is not. And taking this back to a marriage, think about a couple where infidelity has been revealed and they're in counseling. And the unfaithful partner is saying, I've ended the affair. I'm doing everything I'm supposed to be doing. I'm completely devoted to my spouse. And the counselor believes them, their spouse believes them, but meanwhile, the affair is continuing. Their energy is still directed outwards. And as long as that is happening, that marriage is not going to heal. And you cannot place equal blame at the foot of the one who has been betrayed and who is being authentic about putting their energy into repair, as you are to the one who is still lying, and is directing their energy outward. The fourth assumption is believing that there is an equality of mistakes. In other words, that one partner may be working too much is equal to another partner deciding to have an affair. Or one person maybe being a little bit of a nag is equal to another person sleeping around. And those two things are not the same. We all make mistakes in our relationships. That's part of working together. That's part of trying to build a life together. And it is always, always our responsibility to deal with our own stuff and to work to identify those patterns that we have and to work to address them. But I would say there is a very big difference between some sort of pattern that you have and some sort of unconscious response that you may have to your partner, even when it's a negative one, and the deliberate and conscious decision to step out on your marriage and cheat. It is not fair to equate those two things. To say, oh, because you responded in this way, therefore they decided it was okay to cheat. So I'm not saying that either one is right. I'm just saying that there are degrees of wrong. The fifth assumption is that you are not being manipulated or gaslighted. Now, if those things are happening, you are being emotionally abused. And it is never okay to place the blame for the abuse on the victim. If you are being manipulated, your thoughts are probably so turned around that you don't even know what's real. And what's so sad is so often for those that have been gaslighted and manipulated, instead of feeling defensive or resentful when told that they are to blame, they instead agree. They take on all of the blame for the affair themselves, because that's what abuse does. And then finally, the sixth assumption is that changing your patterns or responses will directly change the cheating. It's basically the assumption that there is a cause-effect relationship, a direct cause-effect relationship, and that you can change the outcome simply by changing your way of responding. And what's hard with this one is there is an element of truth to it, meaning that we can't ever control another person, but we can always change our response. And it's often really amazing how much we can change just by altering how we do respond to things. That being said, you cannot keep them from cheating. And this assumption makes me so angry because it's that additional trauma of saying, well, you can control this. If you just do or don't do this one thing, well, then they'll stop. And I think the reason that so many people say that the responsibility for the affair is held jointly is because of that illusion of control. Friends and family want to believe that this can't happen to them. Those in the affair support group are holding on to the belief that if they have joint responsibility for it, that they can somehow control the outcome. And then for counselors, they want to have a positive outcome. And so they want to believe that both people are showing up and are operating with honesty and transparency and are working towards the same goal. Now, even though the responsibility for the affair is on them alone, the responsibility for a healthy marriage is held jointly. So what is your part? Well, your part is to own your stuff. Do what you need to do to recognize and address any negative feedback loops or unhealthy patterns that you have. It is your responsibility to give energy and attention towards the marriage. And finally, it is your responsibility to act on the information that you do have. One of the more difficult things in healing from an affair is recognizing what are those things that you are being blamed for that are not yours to carry. And also recognizing what are those things that you are responsible for that are yours to address.